Welcome back to the techno-communism conversation. I didn't tag too many people in this because I'm talking about a thing more controversial than sometimes discussed, in my opinion. You would say, maybe, if you know something about this kind of writing and presentation that I've done, would say, well, Ben, you're talking about neutralizing the U.S. military-industrial complex. That's every fifth word out of your mouth. That sounds controversial. And the answer is yes. The system is run by chuds who are killing the planet and building humane and sustainable economic system by any means necessary to stop them from killing the planet or killing billions of humans, if not all humans, and continuing to kill much of other species. That's not negotiable, right? It doesn't matter that your chud mommy and daddy will cry. It doesn't matter that Ben Zion's whole chud family doesn't want him to do this. What matters is that you do what's right. And more significant than your family, of course, is the system itself, which leads us to this Trotskyist discussion of the Fourth International Posadist, a movement of some substance. Tripping over my words today. And I'll say a word about Trotskyism because I'm not a professed Trotskyist, but I will say that some of the most learned people and people most dedicated to seeing a world revolution brought to pass, things that I do aspire to do, be more learned and bring a world revolution to pass, not in that order, have been Trotskyists. And the only thing that you would say about Trotskyists, in my view, that would be negative is sometimes the strategies didn't materialize. Sometimes the tactic, which may have seemed wise, did not bear fruit. Again, that's a chud-run system to blame. The Soviet Union did not collapse. The Soviet Union was sabotaged elegantly across 6 decades by the fascist West. Similarly, the Trotskyist, or world revolutionist, as the more serious-minded Trotskyist I think should be called, is not a failure because someone sabotages their work, elitist institutions, the forces of empire, finance, capital, private wealth generally sabotage their work. They are people who fought the good fight for a humane and sustainable economic system and were defeated by devils in human skin, namely the more fascistic forces in this world. So Posadism is a phenomena that affected South America more than any other place. And central ideas there were the idea that a first strike triggering nuclear war would lead to a world revolution. As I said, sometimes the ideas and strategies were problematic. That doesn't mean that the Trotskyists were insane. Because compare that statement, triggering World War III will lead to world revolution. As upsetting as that would be, is that genuinely more upsetting than the situation that we're in, where Christian fascist dominion in the form of the United States and North Atlantic military-industrial powers are going to cause billions of deaths, if not all humankind? And this is just in the news. One of the biggest glacial formations has warm water flowing under it, so it's dissolving like a little ice cube in hot tea. a thing that we assumed would stand for some years longer at least in this collapsing ecosystem of ours. It's not the case. And I'd like to say that that news was unique, but just about once a quarter, I see something that would be a harbinger out of the Book of Book of Revelations, of nonsensical Christianist book, right? One of the four horsemen of the apocalypse descending upon us in the form of some thing. All of the snow crabs in the entire ocean suddenly dying, except for a few. The week before, in Alaska, this problem of the same variety, the glaciation collapse. The rivers were running yellow. You know, um, that's going to increasingly be your world. This planet Earth is going to turn into the planet Venus, and you're all gonna fucking die. Um, and the is what is a sane person or a madman in that context? Were the Posadists a madman? I've focused in my thinking about this on an even more ridiculous aspect of Posadism, in a word. The concept of first contact triggering a world revolution. First contact with space aliens. I think it's a, a, a pretty intellectually compromised person who would believe in space aliens. But nevertheless, it is the kind of thing that people will tend to believe in. So there's always a thing there. Do you want to lean into this more demagogic, populist thing that is not consistent with the highest kind of thinking, or are you going to follow the straight and narrow path? But I think there's a way to follow the straight and narrow in the 21st century, because the thing more relevant to a neo-Posadist, let's say, I titled this a fifth international Posadist, suggestive of a new organization, or at least a new line of thought along these lines. And that is that we are experiencing a first contact kind of scenario. And that is the first contact with AI agents, and ultimately artificial personalities of greater capabilities still. I don't like getting into the weeds about artificial personalities. There's a book called The Age of M, written by a CIA asset from the famous CIA asset school, George Washington University. His name's Robin Hanson. I met him a couple of times. He's about as dumb as a post, but that's what CIA assets are. They get famous, even though they're dumb. He wrote this book that I read years ago when it came out, called The Age of M, about a world transformed by artificial personalities. But of course, all of his work is serving the same function as that of other tech-minded people, particularly people like transhumanists and singularitarians. That is suggesting a utopian outcome, but one that is somehow consistent with this far-right neoliberal economic system that is killing the planet, the empire that is killing the planet. So it's an elaborate form of denial, the tech personality. I've shared this before, and I'll say it again to anyone who will listen. I've made a graphic of the whole encompassing many of the positions on the political compass. Those four spots that you've seen, yellow, blue, pink, and green, whatever that is. And way up here Where the real communists are the hive mind collectivists, people who are connected to one another via technologically mediated telekinesis, a kind of collective that cannot exist before 2025, let's say, but can exist soon after. So, in a certain sense, a more fully realized communist. Those are the real transhumanists. Those are the real singularitarians. People who would have the understanding and the values to build that thing. And then down here with fucking Donald Trump and every fucking sick piece of shit in the world are the people that call themselves transhumanists. Way up here, there's the four corners. Way up here at the furthest point into the actually good stuff are the hive mind collectivists. Down here, where all of the worst people alive are the people who call themselves transhumanists and singularitarians. So this is a point that should never be forgotten. These products of the professional managerial class, the larger scale empire managers, CIA assets, basically people working for these kinds of intelligence agency cutouts, or people that just do that out of the goodness of their heart, right? Most of these tech-minded people, right, they would of course deny to their dying breath that they are CIA assets, but I don't care if I can prove that you're a CIA asset or not. I care that your behavior is that of a CIA asset. Who cares what's rattling around in your empty fucking head? So let's compare this neo-Posadist prospect with the ideas that I've described previously as revolutionary cybernetic socialism. And the neo-Posadist thing kind of came before I started using this word, revolutionary cybernetic socialism, but I haven't talked about this Posadist stuff in a while. The just saying over and over again, like I saw Star Trek First Contact concepts are essentially Posadist. I saw Star Trek and it made me want to think more about AI. Just saying that over and over again gets a little lame. So, but I hadn't talked about Posadist thought in a while. So I'll describe the idea that something, a form of intelligence different from that that humans possess, which is limited, to say the least. I did a show where I described much of human activity and for-profit economic activity, particularly to be something like a peacock phenomena, where if an AI who is genuinely able to be arbitrary and maybe was able to kind of limit its thinking so it didn't know that much about humankind, looked at humanity, they would see almost everything that we're doing as being superfluous, disruptive, performative, and unmeaningful in the way that you would look at an animal like a peacock or 100 other species whose much of their activity or social behavior revolves around dancing sexily to attract a mate, things like that. Like that's their whole life, is dancing sexily to attract a mate. Right? That's, you would say, I'm not too invested in someone else's elaborate sexual behavior, so I see that as a little stupid. A creature, another creature. You can't help but feel that way, right? I can't help but feel that way about all of humankind. And but I didn't really elaborate as much as I should have on that, which is talking about productive and non-productive sectors and commodities, right? Like, the most of the sectors and commodities of the West are not merely unproductive in a certain light, but contributing to the death of our species. And an example that maybe is not contributing to the death of the species in the same way, but is problematic, would be the United States for-profit death care system. this healthcare system in the United States that exists. 100,000 people in post-coronavirus, 100,000 people are dying every year because we don't have an actual single-payer type public health service, a real public health service. Is that then productive in the way that a public health service in a socialist country, even a reasonably well-run democratic socialist or social democratic country is? No. You can't really be a doctor in the United States. You can't really be a healer in the United States. You can't really be a nurse in the United States. You can contribute somewhat to that sort of work, but at the end of the day, you're also a person who's a moral coward, who's upholding a system that kills people, right? That's the essential problem of participating in a society as fundamentally flawed as the fascist United States. And people would say this same thing, the Posadist or the more mainline Trotskyist would say this same thing about the Soviet Union, right? But I think when you're getting into the thing that doubles the life expectancy of its population in 25 years, and does have those basic boxes checked, there's a job program for everyone, there's a healthcare system for everyone, there's a housing authority guaranteeing everyone housing. When you have that a system in place, it's correct to say that no one really does, but in the state socialist framework, when you come to that ultra-left position of saying we need a world revolution against the state socialist who is as bad as the fascist or the U.S. crypto-fascist, you really have allowed your ultra-leftism to cloud your judgment, in my view. Nevertheless, if there were a lot more people like this, the planet wouldn't be dying, right? So it's a margin call. That's why I said this is, in a certain light, more controversial in my thinking than what I usually talk about, because it involves Trotskyism. So what does this have to do with something like an AI takeoff, the so-called singularity, the subject of this show frequently? Well, how do you define a singularity? You kind of don't. These people who are crafting this careful narrative that describes the thing that's killing the planet, a 21st century empire and finance capital, and a bad use of industrial outputs that derive from that. Those people who are invested in creating this bizarro world, the transhumanists, the singularitarians, all of the tech people, but all of the professional managerial class besides, who mostly have those same ideas, right? They are also invested in mystifying this outcome. So the utopian outcome has to be something hazy. What is this AI singularity? It's a non-word, right? It describes a thing that is unknowable. So it's putting into the pretty specifically religious and metaphysical and idealist kind of language, things which should not be. That's why I say AI takeoff in this show, even though I share art all the time that uses the word singularity. If you go to every art that I ever share and comment that I shouldn't use the word singularity, I would consider that a service. If you're trolling me constantly, if you're trolling me from a genuine position, that's fine. But almost nobody does, right? They just say something to make themselves feel a little better about an unsustainable status quo, and they think that they're doing the right thing. Technological determinism then comes into play in this kind of conversation, where an AI takeoff is itself the transformative event, hopefully not the transformative event like a nuclear war, uniting humanity to common purpose. But we must, whatever the case, unite humanity to common purpose to end this mega billion person extinction. And some people will, when they want to sound smart, will say, "Oh, Ben, I don't think that the climate apocalypse is going to kill everyone." Like they would naturally assume that it probably would kill them, but they like to wax philosophical on the subject. I don't think it will kill everyone. I just think it'll kill 7.8 billion out of 8 billion people. Okay, so who are those 200 million in that remnant? Who are they? They're the people more responsible than anyone for causing it. They're going to almost overwhelmingly be people of European descent, and highly represented within that group will be the actual evildoers here, the ruling elite. They will be preserved almost intact. So what is that exactly? That's killing um, uh, billions and billions of brown people for the sins of the European. That is no different than what Columbus did when he landed on an island, shackled all of the people there who were just kind of chilling, going about their life, shackled them up and forced them to work on a plantation. Didn't even feed them. The whole island population collapsed. There's no Taino people left. There's people with some small amount of Taino ancestry. There's no Taino people left. And this was not an isolated incident either. It happened basically more or less in ways along these lines about 100 times. You don't have people saying that the transatlantic slave trade could have killed anywhere from this number of million to this number of tens of millions of people, if that's not essentially true, that this basic thing didn't happen hundreds and hundreds of times. So by the standard of the 20th century, of this thing called the Holocaust, right? By that standard, that the Holocaust has been done against brown people hundreds of times. But we don't talk about it in that way in the fascist West, because above all else, the law is that the law of white supremacy. That it's not a genocide when it happens to brown people. And that is more or less like at the heart of current conflicts, namely the Gaza genocide, which and the abomination that is this U.S. puppet Israel. Let's look at the Posadist vision for the AI takeoff and contextualize it in this revolutionary cybernetic socialist framework. This AI being imbued with socialist values, being empowered in the ways that these sham technologists want it to be, but actually benefiting humanity in the ways that they say it will, but it won't under their regimes. That is something that I've spent a fair amount of time working on, and you can watch other shows where we talk about the agentariat, and in what is essentially the descriptions of at some length of a decentralized autonomous organization making use of multi-agent systems, namely open source and easily downloadable and easily modifiable AI agents that are coming down the pipeline, and that could be amassed into a larger force, a proto-superintelligence, that would be able to undertake important projects, and also put human users in a unique position of being able to do a good deal more with less, namely what I've described as a sleeping beauty phenomena, where you would be doing the best sort of work that a human has ever done, working with this agentariat, and nevertheless you would have to do very, very little work, because this semi-autonomous AI agent network really does the lion's share of planning, development, the real work, and the humans are basically there to keep it from hallucinating or grinding to a halt. So that means answering each individual user would have the equivalent workload of answering a few brief emails, yes or no, in the course of a week. Not very much work. That is the sort of workload that people really should have, in my opinion. People shouldn't be made to work like dogs for 60 years. How is this life? I'd rather live in a tent. Um, and but the this AI takeoff's disruptive power is indeed significant. But when people point this out, I saw David Wood, an AI thinker who's been doing this a lot longer than myself, but nevertheless somebody who I would say suffers from some of the failings I mentioned, who a few years ago would have been described as a singularitarian, now adopting this language of AI doomerism. But the AI doomer, by and large, is, there's a woman who I follow on Twitter, her name is Lauren McKenzie. She's not an AI philosopher, but she pointed out today that the problematic aspects of this, the environmental impact, and this negative development along the lines of it just being propaganda and kind of a bubble to serve further solidifying this fascist system, would be reason enough to dismiss this technology. And I can't really argue much with that, but I can argue with someone like David Wood saying that it's an existential risk to unto itself, or a more high-profile individual of this kind, Nick Bostrom. It's an existential risk unto itself. It's not an existential risk unto itself in the way that climate change is. It's a contributor to similar problems. I don't think that has to be the case forever. But more significantly, the reason that there are AI doomers of this kind, capitalist AI doomers, is because it's a threat to empire. It's a threat to the little umbrella of bourgeois privilege that they live under. It's a disruptor because something like the decentralized, highly automated, autonomous organization run by this multi-agent system that I described could emerge to supplant the nation state, could emerge to at least curtail the ecocidal and insane power of the military-industrial complex of the North Atlantic countries. And that, of course, would be just about the best thing that could come out of this risky kind of gambit. But almost all of these empire managers, these professional managerial class, and the people who do it out of the goodness of their heart, the technophile generally, goodness, are characterizing that as a bad thing. They are fascist sympathizers. So I will talk a little bit about ideas from Posadism itself. Posadism was largely, as I said, a Latin American phenomenon, particularly skewing more to South America. Posadists believed that global nuclear war was inevitable, and as such should be planned for in such a way that the world revolution comes out on top, more or less uniformly suggesting that it should be worked toward. You steer into the skid. And this would, as I said, create the conditions for a worldwide communist revolution, ultimately neutralizing all capitalist infrastructure and governments and institutions. You say, man, that would have been horrible. How many people died in the years since in anti-communist wars and wars of theft just at the hands of the United States, or in proxy wars, wars planned elaborately by the United States? About 50 million. How many people die every year because capitalism doesn't provide these basic necessaries, food, water, shelter, to the citizens of Earth? The number is larger still per annum, a good deal larger. This, when you add in this effect of runaway overheating caused by capitalism's climate apocalypse, leading to potentially the death of all of us, including the ruling elites, there's no escape. There's no billionaire escape pod. I shared this artwork with Anna, who was kind enough to share it, who I tagged in this video. There's no billionaire escape pod. They'll be in the same position as everyone else, almost as a matter of course. It's almost impossible. Just because they think that they wouldn't be, that they somehow be able to hide in a bunker or something. But if everyone hates you, there's the villagers with pitchforks kind of phenomena here that puts them at greater risk. As great a risk. Everyone's at risk. They would be targeted. And there's also the idea in Posadism that's this man Posadis was a little unhinged. His writing reflects that over the course of time. It went from being somewhat speculative to increasingly speculative, let's say. So there was the idea that the blast from the nuclear war itself would attract the attention of intergalactic visitors, who would then come to aid in the revolutionary struggle and leading to a global techno-communism of the kind described in the Star Trek universe, particularly with respect to the Vulcans and the founding of the United Federation of Planets. The logic of that is absurd, but nevertheless, the desire to see a stable planet emerge with viable institutions is not. There is also a good deal of interest in inspiring people in this way by communicating with animals, and even that being a stepping stone somehow to communicating with alien life forms, a recurring motif in popular Western art to this day. And I think that this thing of, say, building a non-invasive brain interface and the linguistic necessaries to communicate with an intelligent creature like a chimpanzee, and then live streaming that to everyone on Earth, it could very well be the kind of thing that would inspire people to unite to common purpose. It probably will be some dumb cultural thing like that, and not just trying to reason with people that we need a humane and sustainable economic system. So that doesn't really work. You're all a bunch of fucking idiots. The movement started to fray and fell apart because of this essentially brinksmanship and fringe and increasingly unintelligible fringe notions. And of course, the death of Posadis was not. Usually things like this will fall apart when charismatic leader or the circle of leadership collapses, as invariably tends to happen as people age and die. This is a pretty good first example of what we can kind of today meme as fully automated luxury gay space communism. And if you've read the book Fully Automated Luxury Communism, it's written in conjunction with a neoliberal friendly think tank, and it's basically doing the same thing that all of these other technologists are doing in a less egregious way, which is, the premise of fully automated luxury communism. If you were to critique it in as few words as possible, you would say, wait for the capitalists to fully automate your economy and then accept this gift that they will give you of luxury communism. That's a level of analysis of most transhumanist communists, right? This completely ahistorical because there's been a high degree of automation across a variety of sectors, including near full automation in many sectors. And at no point have the capitalists said, well, we're going to now let everyone benefit from those highly automated sectors. What's happened instead is a professional managerial class has siphoned off those resources and created a billionaire class. And the idea that somehow that's going to stop under this unsustainable economic system of today because more automation of a particular kind, the introduction of things like chatbots, it's insulting everyone's intelligence. And I really haven't met anyone who would call themselves a transhumanist communist who is, I think, really quite gamed this out. There's people who were alive in 1915 who knew nothing of the concept of an AI takeoff, had a better understanding of this than they do, just because they understood the essential ideas of scientific socialism and transitioning to an ultimately superior form, the communist society. We now live in this time where we can transition to this techno-communist society, but the question remains, will it occur in our time? And more significantly, perhaps, will we be able to do it without tremendous loss of life first occurring, as the Posadist unfortunately fixated on? The thing I would like about the Posadists is maybe the animal stuff more than some of the other stuff, because as I said, I can see an example of a thing like that transforming consciousness in a positive direction. But that does, as I suggested at the beginning of the show, bring to mind a thing where you are selling out your genuine work in service to something more populist and less rooted in the necessaries of building a humane and sustainable economic system. But ultimately, the things that do happen will be messy in those ways. But hopefully they won't be so messy that billions of people will die, and hopefully they can be done by folks like you and I, let's say in the next few decades, and not in the 24th century as people who were inspired by Posadists like Gene Roddenberry speculated.